Hey guys, Calamity here with a follow-up video to yesterday where we were looking at the most used characters in the Spiral Abyss. Now we're looking at the most used teams in the Spiral Abyss. This is still the same sample size as yesterday's video where we used that 1028 player sample size, and this is again just floor 12 of the 3.0 iteration of the Abyss. Now we have the first half most used teams on the left and then second half on the right. So let's start with the top two most used teams. So we have Child, Kazuha, Zhonling, and Bennett in the first half. Now this is just a very solid team. I believe it's just called Child's International Team, as it's just a variation of that. You just use Kazuha's here for swirling damage, the increased elemental boost of course, and just to group up some enemies, since in chamber 1, or the first half of each chamber in 12, that's where most of the groups of enemies are in, and that's where Child thrives on because of his Riptide damage. And of course Zhonling is here because to proc Vape and more AoE damage. Sorry, Child's proccing the Vape, but she's here to help set that up. You also have Bennett here for healing and of course the damage boost. As we mentioned yesterday, Bennett and Kazuha are just like the biggest boost to your single or your main DPS. Now Child's probably here because he's again the harbinger of reruns. We mentioned this yesterday that he's had a lot of rerun banners, so it's safe to say that a lot of people probably have this character, have him built up and ready to go. So yeah, you just group him up with Kazuha, get your pyro application on the field, and then just wail away on Child with his damage, and things should die relatively quickly. Now on the second half, we have Hu Tao, Jingqiu, Zhongli, and Yelan. Now this is also a very, very solid team. Now Jingqiu and Yelan as double sub DPS supports for Hu Tao with the Zhongli shields can be amazing. This is definitely a team used for single target damage, because there are two bosses on the second half. It's the Primal Bishop and the Jade Terror Shroom, the new boss in Sumeru. And this team, without even having any gameplay footage of it, I'm just pretty sure just melts bosses really, really fast. And I don't mean with the cryo elemental reaction. Now they do have Zhongli as like not really a healer, but his shield is just sturdy enough to keep you from taking too much damage, and Hu Tao can heal herself with her burst, and Jingqiu does do a very little amount of healing, which I'm sure some people forget. This is a team comp you wouldn't see if the bosses or the chambers themselves contain the wolf enemies from Surumi Island. And I guess they're in Sumeru too, right? And that is because the wolf enemies are able to penetrate your shields and just damage your health directly. If there were a change in the chambers to once again feature wolves, you would definitely see this pick rate for this team go way down, as it would be much harder. Moving on to the next two teams, we have Ayaka, Shenhe, Kazuha, and Kokomi. And then on the second half, we have the Raiden's international team. We kind of mentioned it yesterday, so I'm just kind of gonna go over the first half team with Ayaka here. So this is a freeze comp. We're using Kokomi here as our hydro application and healer. Kazuha once again for swirl and grouping up enemies, and of course damage boost. Shenhe is here to support Ayaka because her burst will increase cryo damage significantly. It does have a low pick rate that we're seeing here of 7.3%, although that is pretty high compared to some of the other teams. And that is mostly because, again, as I mentioned yesterday, Shenhe only has had one banner ever. If she ever gets a rerun in the near future, then I'm pretty sure you're going to see this sort of team rise in pick rate. It's a very solid team. It freezes anything. And once you group them up, you use Ayaka's burst to basically just kill anything, pretty much any non-boss. If she's C0 in one burst, anything will die. Ayaka's burst is that strong. Moving on, we have once again another variation of Raiden's international team, but instead of Jingqiu, you have Kazuha. Again, this is on the first half, so I'm guessing they swapped him in here because of the grouping capabilities he has. You just want to group up your enemies and then just do the whole setup with everyone's bursts. He is also a great fit for the team because, again, Kazuha can easily get his burst back, especially if you have a sacrificial sword on him. If you're using that, just build up a lot of energy recharge, and he will basically have his burst up all the time, just like Xingqiu. Now, on the second half, we have Yoimiya, Yelan, Yunjin, and Zhongli. Now, this is basically the team that I use, except I don't have Yelan. I wish I did, but I use Xingqiu, and it works just as fine. Yep, this team is gonna melt the bosses, and that's pretty much why she's here. Now, again, if this is a Spiral Abyss that favors Yoimiya and it favors single target. Now, if the chambers were instead not bosses, but large groups of enemies, you would probably not see Yoimiya as much, similar to like what I mentioned with Hu Tao. Just they're not that great at killing groups of enemies. Well, Yoimiya more specifically here I'm talking about, but Yoimiya is not that great for taking out groups of enemies. You would probably use somebody else. And then on the first half, some people were using the Raiden's international team for the first half, and not as many compared to the second, because the international team is really great for single target damage. Again, you're just constantly cycling through your bursts, which means you're constantly getting healed, boosted, getting all this damage increase, and Raiden just has all the time in the world to just destroy any boss in her way, and then you just reset and redo it all over again. On the second half, some people wanted a challenge mode here because we have basically the same child comp that we saw in the first half, but has a much lower pick rate. Again, child gets a lot of damage when he's facing against multiple enemies because of the whole Riptide mechanic he has. But I guess some people don't care and they just wanted to use him on this chamber or on the second half. But hey, they were able to do it, so it's definitely doable. Must have been a lot more harder. I would imagine that their child probably has like a polar star, a really good weapon, really good artifacts before trying to do most of the boss fights with this team. And then on the bottom we have basically a free-to-play version, or those that didn't get Shenhe version of Ayaka's team, but instead of Shenhe we have Rosaria, you know, which is just as fine. She is a great cryo battery, gives you some mobility with her teleport, and then free crit rate if your Ayaka is lacking it, which you shouldn't because cryo resonance and the blizzard strayer, but more crit rate is always nice as long as it's not overcapped. And it's basically the same thing, just with Rosaria. Now on the bottom right team, right next to my face, we have the Yoimiya comp once again, but instead of Yunjin, you have Yelan. Again, I'm sure that's gonna do just fine, and it will just melt bosses. That is pretty much the most popular teams on the Spiral Abyss. Unfortunately, not a lot of, actually none, no Dendro. Despite the blessing of the Spiral Abyss, I believe, to be favored for Dendro characters, there just isn't a lot of usage for them, and that's mostly just because it's still fairly new, and a lot of people are probably still building their Traveler, their Kali. I know I am. I'm still trying to get artifacts for her, as well as those damn mushrooms, which are annoying to farm for her Ascension materials, and I gotta fight the Jade Terror Shroom for the Dendro Stones, etc., and the thing the boss drops. So I'm very curious to see how the team comps here will change going into 3.1, if we're going to start seeing more Dendro focused teams. Like as we mentioned yesterday, Keqing had a higher pick rate in the Spiral Abyss. But yeah, as more and more people are discovering that the Aggravate / Hyper Bloom reactions are really solid, I do hope to see more variations in the Spiral Abyss meta. I mean, when you look at these teams, it's like, why change something? Or, you know, if it's broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean? Like, no one's gonna change their team comps because they just work, right? You get all the stars and little to no effort, and off you go. Now, like I said, you probably will see some percentage changes depending on what the chambers have. In this iteration of the Spiral Abyss, there was a lot of bosses, So you see a lot of Yoimiya picks, but if it were a group of like a large group of enemies, you probably wouldn't see Yoimiya as much. Hu Tao, you wouldn't see as much if there was a lot of wolf enemies, but she's also bad against the like flying enemies. Like if there was the electro manifestation boss from Inazuma, like Hu Tao is really bad at fighting that boss because she's melee and that thing just flies around and moves a lot. So you probably wouldn't see her pick rate so high here. Characters I'm surprised to not see are Ganyu. There's no Ganyu comps at all, or any comp that involves Ganyu. You instead have Ayaka. It looks like she's being favored more in the Asia server over Ganyu. And I'm also surprised to see so much child usage. I really don't use Tartaglia. He's a good unit, don't get me wrong. It's just I'd rather just use other characters. For me, what I did on the Spiral Abyss is I used the Raiden's international team with the Kazuha variant that you see on the left, and then I used Yoimiya on the second half for bosses with Jincho, Yunjin, and Zhongli. That was my setup, and yeah, hey, you know, I got all the stars, so I'm happy. But yeah, is there any surprises, disappointments, lack of characters you're seeing in the statistics here? Let me know in the comments below. But like I said, I really do think these are going to change once more people build up their Denjo characters. But not only that, but also as more people or more Denjo characters in general are added to the game, since our only choices right now are Kali, Tignari, and Traveler. But hopefully we get to see more Denjo characters in the next coming updates and see more variations in team comps. That being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.